everyone, it's Laura from Homeschooling with Classic Stories. This is week 7. This is the week that you did the pie and the patty pan. If you remember, that's the story with the cat and the dog who have a tea together. So, knowing that it's called the pie in the patty pan, you probably have guessed that one of the first things that we did this week was to do kitchen. We chose to do a pie, but we could have also done muffins. If you recall in the story, the cat chooses to eat muffins instead of eating the pie that she made. So if you would prefer to make muffins this week, this would be a good week to do so. Though, if you chose to make muffins in um, the Peter Rabbit story, you might want to switch to pie, which is why we switched to pie. So you can go back and watch the Peter Rabbit one if you would like. As far as making pie, I'm not sure how good of a baker you are. I am not, and so please know that there is such a thing as pie filling and pie crusts, and all of these things are pre-made for your convenience. And so they're also easier to work with children when you buy the pre-made stuff. It's perhaps not as exciting. And if you would like to make a pie from scratch, that is great, especially if that is within your skill set. But I will tell you that most of the joy for at least my son is to dump stuff out of this and then kind of smear it around. So he's still got the joy of cooking, even if he didn't have the full, I don't know, perhaps motherly experience that he is meant to get. So anyway, so that's what we made. We made pie this week. And then also this week we did some math language. This isn't something that we focus on a lot. Usually I try and just sort of insert math language into conversations that we are having, or conversations around other things like worksheets or whatnot. But this time I actually sat down with him and we did some math language words to make sure that he was really getting them. And this week, if you recall in the story, that there was some focus on quarter past. So in the story, the dog is supposed to meet at the cat's house at at 4:15, so quarter past, and the dog gets there at 4 and so has to wait. So we did some time with just a simple clock. Um, realize how very white and glary this would be. Anyway, so this is just a simple clock from IKEA. It was very inexpensive. What I did to it, I did not put a battery in it, as you can see. I also opened it up. If you happen to buy the same exact one from IKEA, the front does come off. I took the second hand out of it because having a second hand can often be confusing and distracting when you're working with your children. And so I also chose to put painter's tape, like the blue paint that you see here. I chose to put that around the hour hand so that it was noticeably a different hand. I think that calling it the little hand and the big hand is great, or the short hand and the long hand is great, or even the hour and minute hand is great. But I think that seeing that can be really hard at this age. And so I just wanted to make them different colors. And so you see how I have modified the clock in that way. This particular clock is great because it just has the little winding part on the back. And so when we wanted to talk about it being 4 o'clock, we talked about it being uh, 4. So like I did the hands around and we talked about it being 4. He is already very familiar with clock times. So I just, what time is it? He said it was 4 o'clock. And that's not a problem. If your child is still working on numbers, clock-based numbers and telling time, that's fine too. That's a super normal kindergarten-based skill. So your child is certainly doing fine. They don't have to know their clock numbers yet, but just meet your child where they are. So wherever they are, make sure that you are emphasizing that 4 o'clock is this time the o'clock, meaning that it's pointing to the 12. And then in the book, we have the language of quarter past. So make sure you show them quarter past. And this is a really weird concept because, especially if you're from a place that doesn't have quarters, so like not the United States, then you don't even have the benefit of money to turn to when you want to talk about quarters. When I talk about quarters, I almost always use quarter cups, which again is probably weird if you're, I don't know, in Europe or something and you're not used to cup-based measurements. So, um, sorry. However you choose to illustrate quarters, though, we also did simply with our hands covering to show that it was a quarter meaning one of four. Um, this is a really hard concept because you're not going to talk about fractions. You're not really going to talk about division outside of like very simplistic representational division at this age. So, really, the idea here was that he knew that a quarter meant that there are three numbers that are happening, right? So there are 12 numbers on this. So if you divide four, you need three. Okay, so we focused on there being three numbers, so he could count that there were three numbers. So there's one here. So one, two, three, or if you want to count the other way, one, two, three, whatever makes sense in your head, just make sure that you're consistent. Okay, so we pointed out that this is quarter past four. This is the time that the dog should arrive. And then we talked about, so he also knew that this was 4:15, which is great. Again, wherever your child is in their clock-based knowledge, this isn't something to stress about. But next, we then focused on it being 4:30, and so that being half past. Um, so this was something that was also new to him because he always says 4:30, 5:30, whatever it is, 30. And so saying half past is maybe just regional. I'm not really sure why I don't and no one I really know says half past. Um, but this was a very new one for him. So that was a good one to share besides the quarter past. And then, of course, we come to our last one, um, especially those of you who are ESL teachers, you know this is the hardest one to teach. So quarter till. Um, if you say quarter until, please let me know in the comments. I've always said quarter till, leaving off the un part. So I'm actually really curious if there are people who say a quarter until five. This is actually the hardest one to get. Whether or not you teach this in other ways or you're teaching this to a child, I'm sure you know that it is really hard to figure out that you need to go to the next number, which is five, and then say it is a quarter till that time. So that's what we did for this one. We ran around and did different numbers. I let him play with this. This is his clock. This is not, though it is a clock that I sometimes put on the wall if I don't want him to play with it. I do have a battery for it that I just stick in if like I really don't want him playing with the clock. Because this is something that he'll sit with. So just kind of he sat there and winding it, and then like we would talk about what time it was, and then I'd give it back to him and he'd wind it again, and then we talk about what time it was. This did not take very long as far as an activity. It did take him a while to figure out the words quarter and half and to get those consistently correct. And then in the days that followed, there was some struggle as well because I would occasionally point to the clock when I noticed that it was on a quarter or the half. And that was a little bit rough. So we're still working on that. We're not going to sit down and work on it again because he's got the sit down part. But you know, probably throughout the next couple of weeks, I'll point to the clock and have him notice if it is at a quarter or at a half and just ask him what time it is, just to confirm that he's really understood what the purpose of this or understood what the math language was around this because it is a bit challenging of math language. All right, last thing, the worksheet. Remember, you can always find the worksheet down below. The worksheet for this week is really, really simple. So this week, in your story, you had a cat and a dog and a magpie, and all three of those animals were eating things, and most of their disagreements came from, well, food. And so simply, we made science food chains based on what these animals eat. Now, understanding what a food chain is a really great goal. If your kid is there, that's fantastic. Mine is not really there. He's interested in what other animals eat. Um, but this wasn't really like a strong, like, we're not going to get into food webs or anything. Um, but if you want to, you can explore that further after you do this first one. The main thing I wanted him to see was how we look up information. So, what I mean is, I don't particularly know what cats eat. So, what I did was I sat down with my tablet and my son and his markers, and I said to him, "What do cats eat?" And he told me cat food, which is an excellent answer. However, it's perhaps not the best for a food chain. And so I said to him, "I don't know what cats eat. What would they eat if they didn't have cat food? Let's look it up." And so I'm making the point to him that I don't know everything because this is going to happen throughout our homeschooling journey. I will not know something. And so what do we do when we don't know something? We look it up. Wow, I sound a lot like Sesame Street when I say that. Apologies. Um, so kind of emphasizing this idea of it's okay to not know things, but look them up when you don't know. So he saw me type into Google, "What do cats eat?" By the way, that will give you terrible responses. Try something like feral cats or wild cats. That will give you much better answers. I read out three choices for him. He picked one and he chose to draw it. Then we looked at whatever he picked here, and then we did the next one based on around that. So that's what we did for this whole worksheet was simply him telling me what he thought the animal ate, me saying, "I don't know, let's look it up," and us going through. So he really got to see me use my tablet for looking up information specifically. He enjoyed doing it some. He typed the word dog in for this one. So, it's fine. Same with the dog, though, by the way. Please write feral or wild dog. Otherwise, you will get some really not great responses. And then this is meant to be a magpie. You'll get fine responses for that. I'll show you the one he drew. His drawings are so what they are. So let me tell you about this. So from cats, he had a choice of I can't really recall, but the choice he made was mouse. And so this is his attempt at Mickey Mouse with the two circles for the ears and then a big circle for the head. Cats eat Mickey Mouse. Okay. And then what do cats also eat? Sorry, what do mice eat? We had a look at the internet. He chose seeds, and so this is a picture of seeds. I really just sort of let him draw what he thinks that things look like. There's a particular seed pod on some grass that's like some tall grass outside of our house that does look very much like this. So I think that's what he was trying to go with. Because we've mentioned before that this grass that's very near our house is has seeds on it. Okay, dogs. He chose squirrels out of the choices that were on the list. Um, that's what he chose to draw for a squirrel. And then squirrels eat acorns. This came from directly Squirrel Nutkin because we had done a art hub for kids on how to draw an acorn. The acorn he drew several weeks ago looked nicer, but I thought it was really cool that he remembered the basic shape and stuff of how to draw it. Then magpie, he chose a beetle, which is what he drew here. I really liked the antenna he went with. And then finally, we looked up what do beetles eat, and they eat leaves. At the end, I pointed out that all of the things are plants and that plants get their energy from the sun. And we just sort of had a laugh about that. That was not part of my point, but I did want to make sure I emphasize that this does go on, it continues. So make sure you pick this up down below so that you can have a copy of this and enjoy doing your science food chains. I will see you next time for part 2 to talk about what else we did this week. Have a nice day.